Paul here at Butt Crack Cycles. We've got another sort of revive and drive episode going on. Our candidate today, I almost said our victim, mad scientist. Our candidate today is a 1975 Shovelhead. It's an FL bike. This is brought to us by Mr. Hans. He brought me an SNS carburetor like, I don't know, 2 months or so ago. Y'all saw the video about rebuilding it. I'll put the little screen capture or whatever up right here. And then I gave him back the carb. He got working on the bike. He's just been busy, and this needs a lot of electrical work. He was kind of getting frustrated with the electrical stuff, and I enjoy electrical work. A lot of people don't, and so I am not. I'm not knocking him for throwing in the towel. It's just something most people don't enjoy. It can be really frustrating, but for me, it's actually strangely relaxing. So let's show you all the bike. Let me flip the camera around. All right, here's what we're working with. Like I said, this is a 75 FL. I think this is a good looking bike. Nice seat, nice handlebars. I like that fender a lot. Tombstone taillight, little luggage rack. Sweet bike. Mr. Han said he's owned this thing for like 30 plus years, but it's been sitting for like 6 or 7. Like I said, this thing definitely needs some wiring help. This is probably going to get replaced. In fact, I know this is going to get replaced. I've got another one down there. In the parts, he brought me fuel tanks in the laundry baskets and a couple of different, cardboard boxes worth of parts. But the wiring on this, I don't know. I might end up having to just rewire this whole bike because you get starting looking at it. Here's a good example. Let's flip the seat up. These wires back here, I presume, are for the taillights. So we got bare wire here. Then it's spliced right there, then it's spliced again here, and it goes into this harness, and it's spliced again here, and then you follow it up to your switch, and then it's spliced again somewhere in here, one of them. Maybe that one's not spliced, but there's just splice on top of splice, and bare wires twisted together with some electrical tape thrown over them, and, a whole bunch more splices down in that harness too. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with pull the battery out, cut all the zip ties on all the harnesses everywhere on this bike, and then just have an assessment of where to begin and how much wiring do I want to do. My gut tells me this is probably going to be a complete wiring job. So I sat down and started working my way through this wiring harness and pretty rapidly figured out that basically none of it was worth saving. A lot of the terminals would just pull off in your hand. Some of the ring terminals were just wire looped back around themselves, which I guess works, but isn't really the greatest in my mind. So I sat down with the radio playing in a pipe and wire strippers and shrink wrap and heat tube and all of that stuff, and started putting together my own harness and doing stuff like battery cables of the appropriate size and even just primary wiring of the correct size. When I had the battery out, I realized the old battery had leaked so much acid it was starting to eat a hole in the transmission. I was worried it had eaten all the way through into it, but I was able to brake clean it all off and wipe it out with a rag. And turns out it hadn't made it all the way through yet, but man, that battery had been there in a while and wasn't happy. Back to the wiring job though, Mr. Hans brought me a 48 to 58 panhead style dashboard and ignition switch, so I started putting that all together, riveting in the circuit breaker holders and putting in circuit breakers. You can see this is kind of how I, start doing wiring, is lay the harness in. It's not pretty, it's not perfect yet, but everything's nice. It's fairly neat. It's organized. It's shrink wrapped. And then it was time for me to throw a battery in this thing and kind of just start checking my work. So you can see I've got the voltmeter out, turning the switch on, and I'm just making sure that I've got power in the right places. I made sure that the taillight was actually functional. This isn't wired up to the bike yet, but I just wanted to make sure it would work. And then it was time to put a headlight in. I'd already run my wires up for the headlight and just with the voltmeter guaranteed that they were working, and then just put proof of concept into reality. Headlights, low beams, high beams, looks really good. I went to check the switches that were in the handlebar and found that when I turned the run switch on, it would immediately blow the main fuse that I had wired into this bike. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. For the time being, I went ahead and put my speedometer in the dash, wired it up, hooked the speedometer cable up to it, and then started installing the Dynatech ignition. I spent quite a bit of time on this because I had to install the ignition, wire the ignition, change the coil, and you can see me here taking push rod tubes loose so that I could attempt to time this module. I couldn't time it. There was something wrong with this pickup. It would never break the connection. So I spent 30 or 40 minutes troubleshooting it, then called Dynatech and spent over an hour on the phone with them. And together we determined that this module was just bad. So I talked to Mr. Hans. He said, you know what, just throw the points back in it. So then I had to pull the Dynatech back out, install the points, time the points, gap the points, do everything I needed to do there, put the points coil back in, and then I was finally ready to try and start this thing. Threw a fuel jug on it and jumped the starter solenoid, and here we go. That's good. I mean, it runs. We've got plenty of work left to do. Obviously, it's smoky and oil and grease on the pipes, and I just realized this front pipe is rattling, and it's sumped. I knew that some, so I threw this oil pan underneath it. You can see I'm collecting oil out of the blow-by tube in it. So now I can tidy up this wiring and put the tanks on it and keep going. I also wanted to take just a second and just kind of show where we ended up on the wiring. Now that's all tucked up away. See, it's nice and clean there on the side. And if we walk around to the other side, same deal. We've got two harnesses running here, a harness that runs down the backbone, goes to the back, and then everything else is just kind of nice and neatly tucked up underneath the dashboard. And so we end up with not a whole bunch of electrical spaghetti, which is how I like it. When we put the tanks on this, you pretty much won't be able to see any of this, and that's always the goal for me in wiring. So once I was fairly satisfied with the wiring and I had it mostly all nice and neat and tucked away, I was going to dry fit the tanks and just see how this went. Getting these tanks to work with this dash ended up being one of the biggest headaches in this project. I had to change the studs that were in the tank to the correct length studs. These are from Colony Supply, these Parkerized ones that I put in there. So that was quick and easy. And you can see here, I've got the tanks set on there. They're on there, the tanks are shimmed. But this took me a while. It probably took me an hour and a half just to get to this point. And the reason why is because mostly the circuit breakers are running into the sides of the tank. And I had to space the dashboard up. So I needed to take the tanks on and off multiple times. And I ended up getting the circuit breakers to finally be happy. I wrapped them in butyl rubber, and then I was trying to put the chrome piece on top, and you can see it just does not fit like at all. It doesn't sit down over the ignition switch. It doesn't fit to the tanks. I ended up having to clearance out the little hole for the warning light, and we'll come back to this later in this episode. There was a lot more clearancing going on, but I figured, you know what, I can do that later. Let me put some gas in this thing and try and start it out of its own fuel supply. And that didn't work. The reason why is the petcock. Amazingly, I did not have a petcock sitting around. I thought I did, so I ended up having to order one. While I bled the brakes. I always back bleed brakes on a Harley. It seems to work much better. I'll crack a line loose at the master cylinder and push fluid in from the caliper. And once you've got fluid come out of the line, then you can push fluid into the master cylinder. This works so much better on a system that is dry and has never been ran before than trying to regular bleed. You can see I'm doing it on the front here too, and try and get everything on the bike covered so that any brake fluid doesn't potentially knock paint off. Last thing I want to show you on brakes is this trick right here. Once you've got front brakes functional, you've back bled them, then you can bleed them like normal. Take you a rag, put it around your grip, and then do what I did right here. pump the handle up, the lever up as much as you can, pull it as far back to the grips as possible, and then throw a zip tie around it and walk away. Just come back in a couple hours or overnight. It'll bleed all the tiny little air bubbles out of the system. This works every single time. It's a good, simple, foolproof, old school tip. Just something to throw out there. Then I wanted to go ahead and finish up my teeny little last bit of wiring, which was tail light. So with all that hooked up now actually to the bike, I discovered that while I did have a running light, I had no functional brake lights. I did a little bit of checking around and found that the brake light switch was bad. It had just an excessive amount of resistance when the pedal was depressed, so I had to pull that out, replace it, and then bleed the brakes again. I also spent some time checking one of the solenoids underneath the battery box. It was bad. I suspected that it was. Previously, I had just been starting this bike by the solenoid on the starter itself. So I replaced the solenoid, soldered in a new run switch, soldered in a new start switch, and then made sure all of that worked before finally putting the rest of the handlebar controls on. I cranked the bike up, grabbed a screwdriver, and spent some time tuning the carburetor. And then also verified that the stator was charging and would increase charging as RPM went up. Back to that dash cover. More time cutting, a lot of trial and error, but this is finally what I came up with. It's about as tight of a fit as I can get on these tanks, and with this dash, this is a lot of work. Like I said, the tank fit, the dashboard fit, and the chrome cover fit to make all of this work together between the pan head stuff and the shovel head stuff was quite a bit of work. Then after that last run, I found I had a pretty good pushrod tube seal leak, which wasn't too surprising. He told me there probably would be one. So I set about loosening push rods and pulling them out one at a time so I could reseal all of the push rod tubes and also do a hydraulic lifter lash adjustment. I ran through all of this and was pretty excited to go ride the bike, but things didn't go well. I'll tell you why here. All right, so I thought I'd take a second and do like a little walk and talk. I've already walked out to the building with a cup of hot tea and ran the heater for a little while, and just update y'all on where I'm at on this bike. So the footage that y'all saw previous to this, me working on the pushrod tube seals and doing pushrod adjustment, that was from 2 days ago. I was unable to work on this bike yesterday. I had another job that I had already committed to doing that I needed to get knocked out, and it took basically all day. So now I'm back on this thing. Well, 2 evenings ago when I finished that pushrod adjustment, I cranked the bike up, let it run a little while. There's no leaks from the pushrod tube seals, which is great. So I backed the thing out of my little shop, and I'm all excited to go ride this thing. I went to put the bike in gear. It has a new clutch cable on it. I'd done a clutch adjustment on it earlier, and you pull the clutch all the way in, and it feels good. Everything feels right, but the second you put it in gear, the bike immediately stalls out. Just bam, stalls. So I think we've got some stuck clutch plates as a result of this bike having sat around for so long. I would guess the clutch plates have kind of welded themselves together, like rusted themselves together. I've heard of people doing stuff like, push the bike down a really big hill and get going 30 miles an hour or something and pop the clutch in second or third gear and it'll break it all free. Or get it to start up and then rev it up and then slam it in first gear and just take off like a bat out of hell and just shift it through the gears and it'll break it all free. That doesn't sound like a good idea to me. That just sounds a little reckless and a little careless, especially with someone else's bike. It sounds like a great way to shock load the drivetrain and tear something else up. And finally, this does not have an isolated primary. It's engine oil that's running through the primary side of things. And so where's all that rust going to go? If you break all that crap free, it's going straight into the oil in the primary. Then your oil pump's going to suck it up out of the primary, send it through the oil pump, send it through the engine, and yeah, that just sounds like a terrible idea. And after pulling the primary cover off, this is what I found. Things were pretty rusty under there. You might note that this is actually an isolated primary. I was wrong. And the oil that was in it was rusty and gross and just absolutely disgusting. So even though I was able to get a clutch adjustment, I had adjusted the clutch on this bike earlier when I replaced the clutch cable. You can see that the pressure plate moves, but it wasn't actually moving the clutches within the clutch hub. You can see here how you get the pressure plate out all in one piece. I'm showing you where you just use some washers and the adjuster nut, or the lock nut rather, and that's a great way to just keep it all together instead of having the springs flying everywhere. And here we go, pulling the clutch out. That should come out in pieces. Friction disc steel, but you can see it's all just welded itself just absolutely together. And the clutch hub looks teetotal terrible. And when I called Mr. Hans to tell him what I found, he was basically like, oh, I was afraid of that. Sounds like he had an employee he had to fire years ago who took revenge by filling this bike up with water, and as a result, everything under here was disgustingly rusted. You can see I'm using an impact screwdriver and easy outs and taps and crap to get the chain adjuster bolts out. The screws, whatever you want to call them, those countersunk ones, were just completely stripped out and stuck in there, and everything under here wasn't much fun. Anyways, we continue with taking it apart. Use a jam bar and a big breaker bar to take the compensator nut loose, and then you can use an impact with a little holding tool to take the clutch hub nut loose. That one's left-hand thread, just throwing that out there. Then you can pull your primary assembly out. The pressure plate out of this bike was absolutely disgusting. It was all warped up, and those springs were basically garbage. So all of that got replaced with some nice flat stuff and some brand new springs. And then we got a new clutch hub, a new clutch bearing shell, put new bearings in with red grease. This is always fun and tedious and frustrating and annoying. And then put it back in, torqued it. Remember, lefty tighty on that one. Jam bar back in after the primary's in, torqued the compensator. You can see I actually safety wired the primary, and then put our new clutch plates and steels in, and then just set a baseline stack height for the pressure plate springs. And when I was doing the clutch adjustment on this, something just didn't quite feel right, so it led me to pull the exhaust off and the kicker cover off so I could get to the throwout bearing, and this is what I found. More water in the oil, lots of water. You see that drop of water running down, and stick my finger in there, and that's just water. So I got all of that out as much as I could, cleaned it, flushed it, cleaned it, flushed it. Oil slinger looked kind of gross, and throwout bearing did too, so it got replaced. Then it was time to finally back this thing out of my building once I had put all of that back together and go for a test ride.
So I'm currently in the side of the road, coming up this hill, and the bike just cut off on me. Acts like it's starving for fuel. I'll let it sit here a minute or two and try and start it up again, and then guess go back to the house. Luckily I didn't make it far.
Alright, so I managed to make it home, and bike's sitting right there behind me. Basically, here's what I came up with. You see I'm missing a gas cap, right? So I got it off of the side of the road there, and I turned around and started coming back towards home, and it cut off on me again, and it's like it was starving for fuel, and it was like it was running out of fuel. And then I said, you know what, let me just pull a gas cap off. So I yanked the gas cap off, and it fired right back up and sat there and ran, and I ran it the rest of the way home like that, and everything seemed good. So I'm thinking probably just a gas cap that wasn't venting correctly. Got it stuck down here in my pocket somewhere. But basically about as soon as I got here to home, this thing started making some racket, and it sounds like it's coming from rockers, maybe. I'm a little afraid to run it, if I'm being honest. Yeah, it is not confidence inspiring, so I'll crank it up here just so y'all can hear it, and I guess there's no way around it. You kind of basically have to run it to try and figure out where the noise is coming from. Coming from this back rocker box. Do the old mechanics here. what I discovered was that the intake lifter on that back cylinder wasn't staying pumped up, and so it was letting a ton of slack get in the push rod. I readjusted the lifters again, and it seemed like it held the adjustment this time. I think it was just a matter of these lifters having sat and bled down for so long before that one decided it wanted to act right. So then I was able to actually put some miles on this thing. I rode about 25 miles on it that morning and called Mr. Hans, and he came and went down the street on it. Got a couple of videos of him riding it. Then I jumped on my iron head, and he and I went and rode around a little bit too, and he took it home.
Right on, dude. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this episode. And man, there's a lot of work that went into this bike that y'all didn't see. A lot of hours into this thing. First thing I got to say, though, is, of course, thanks to Mr. Hans for bringing this to me. He watches this YouTube channel. That's how he found me, how we got in touch. Like I said, he's about 2 hours away. So thanks, Hans, for bringing me your bike. Thank you for trusting me with your bike. And of course, thank you for being patient. Like I just said, there was a lot of time in this bike, and I ended up having his bike almost a month, over 3 weeks. And a lot of the reason for that is because it's 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, and you get working on it. And you think you have everything you need, and then you find something else that's wrong, and then you fix that, and then you find something else that's wrong, and then you fix that, and you have to wait on parts. And of course, I have other jobs I have to do. And while this bike was absolutely a high priority for me, I of course, have to keep my promises to all of my other customers on their jobs too. So again, thanks, Mr. Hans, for your patience. Thank you for trusting me with this bike. I do have a few like closing thoughts on this motorcycle and this episode, though. You know, if you're watching this and you're thinking about buying a motorcycle that's been sitting for 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, whatever it is, and you think to yourself, oh, I'm going to throw a battery in it and then I'm going to rebuild the carburetor and put some tires on it and ride it. Well, you're probably not. Like I said, 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards on these things. You're always going to find something else that needs attention and something else that needs work. And that's just how it goes. And that was the case here. And then it was compounded with the whole water in places it shouldn't be, thanks to that disgruntled former employee. And that's just down low and dirty. You know, sounds like this guy probably deserved to have been fired. I would have fired him if he was my employee, from what I've heard. And yeah, that's just kind of crappy to do to somebody's pride and joy motorcycle, right? So that made things worse here. But yeah, I hope this was informational, entertaining, whatever, for those of y'all watching this. And finally, in the interest of full disclosure, because I always try and keep it real here, there is still work to do left on this bike. I didn't hand it back to him in absolute, total, perfect shape. There's still some little nitpicky, piddly things to do. But the biggest thing left, or at least the biggest issue we're having with it right now, is in the transmission. I went and rode the bike, like I said, around 25-ish miles, and I could get it into 4th gear. It was a little reluctant at times, but I always could seem to get it. And I was happy, you know, running 50-ish miles an hour, not going too fast cruising. And he brought it home, and he went and rode it 40 miles the night that he brought it home. He texted me. He's like, dude, I rode 40 miles. I'm happy. Paranoid about deer, blah, blah, blah. But I got home and I'm psyched. I'm like, yes, great, cool. He's happy. And then I talked to him a few days later. And he's like, dude, I'm having trouble with this thing. It doesn't want to seem to shift into 4th gear. It's kind of grinding. So we kind of talked on the phone about, you know, maybe playing with the free play in the clutch, playing with the linkage on the shifter. So he and I have been kind of trying to work through this on the phone. Hopefully there's not any significant transmission damage going on. I've offered to come out there to him in my service truck free of charge, just to try and stand behind my work, because I always try and stand behind everything I've done. I understand people work really hard for their money, and you know, I don't charge top dollar, but I'm also not cheap. So I want people to feel like they've gotten good value for their money and good service. So we're still working that out. Don't know where we're going to end up on it, but I will keep you all updated.
As always, thanks for watching. If you want a bike worked on, info@buttcrackcycles.com. And again, thanks, Mr. Hans, for bringing me this Shovelhead. Happy to have another old piece of American iron back on the road. See y'all later.